This is a Pasco Media production. Please visit pascomedia.com.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show where we explore the miraculous nature of the mundane as we look at one part of the Catholic tradition to help you engage more fully in the practice of faith. Past episodes are available at renovopodcast.com. I'm Doug Tuke, and today we are digging into a topic that really hit me this last week. I had a young person in the youth ministry that I'm volunteering part-time and working in who enlisted in the Army. And he came up to me after about 15 minutes of adoration, and he said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And he said, "He says I have a problem. I have a dilemma." He said, "I'm not sure I'm supposed to do this. All my life, I wanted to be in the military, but I'm struggling to understand if that's okay based on my beliefs." And it shook me to the core because I don't know that in my entire career of youth ministry I had ever had that conversation with a young person. And I am not anti-military. In fact, I've seen the military, all branches of the military, become incredible instruments for young men and women in terms of discipline and just really building a platform for an incredible life. So I'm a pretty nonviolent person, but I never really thought about this topic, the topic of just war theory. And this boy really pushed me, and so I dug in, and I'm excited about the show, and I'm going to share this show with him specifically because I thought it was incredible. So here's what we're going to do. I just want to kind of tackle what the title "Just War Theory" means, where it even comes from, but also I want to go right into the text of the Catechism because there's just simply no better way to actually understand the Church's teaching except to do that. So we need to dig into specifically what the Church says. So that's what we're going to do. So wars happening all around the world, and there's a lot of escalating conflicts, specifically like in Syria and North Korea, and a lot of Catholics are wondering what kind of guidance the Church can actually give in evaluating these situations. And here's the thing, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraphs 2302 to 2317, really teach authoritatively, really, what constitutes the just defense of a nation against an aggressor. And this is called the just war doctrine, okay? Now, it was first enunciated by St. Augustine, 354 to 430, a real father of the church, doctor of the church. And over the centuries, it was pretty much taught by the doctors of the church, such as Thomas Aquinas, and then formally embraced by the magisterium, by bishops, okay? Which has also kind of adapted it to the situation of modern warfare in many ways. So the following explanation is really just going to follow exactly what the Catechism says. So in 2302, 2303, those paragraphs are titled Righteous versus Unrighteous Anger. Now listen to this and then let's break it open, okay? Here's what the Catechism says. Anger is a desire for revenge. Anger is the passion, emotion by which a person reacts to evil, real or apparent, and seeks vindication of their rights, that is, justice. So by itself, the passion is neither moral or immoral, but becomes so by reason, or it's being ordered or disordered, that is, reasonable according to the circumstances. An ordered anger is directed to a legitimate object and with an appropriate degree of vehemence. An inordinate anger is directed either to an illegitimate object or with an unreasonable vehemence. So, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, vice may be by defect as well as excess. So, the presence of evil should provoke a righteous anger, which, if absent, constitutes an actual sinful insensibility. So consider the just anger of the Lord to the presence in the temple of the money changers and the action that he took. That's in the Gospel of John 2, verses 13 through 17. So provoked by this offense against his Father, Jesus formed whips and drove them from the temple. Righteous anger and the acts which flow from it intend the correction of vice, both for the good of the individual sinner and the common good. So the restoring of the order of justice disturbed by sin and the restraint of further evil. This is a great paragraph about what anger is. Now, it keeps going on. Now, listen closely. On the other hand, unjust anger seeks to do evil to another for its own sake, the harm of the body or soul that it entails. While one may desire and employ physical force for the sake of correction, restraint of evil, and restoring justice, even if it entails injury and death, one may never desire it for its own sake. So to desire some injury or to desire some slight injury for an evil motive would be venially sinful. That's plain and simple, okay? To desire grave injury or death would be gravely sinful. Think about the language there. That's important. A Christian may never, of course, desire the damnation of the evildoer. Charity requires that we will the good, especially the ultimate good, salvation, for every human being. Unfortunately, the entertainment media often promotes an image of anger and vengeance, which is closer to bloodlust than to justice. That's straight out of the catechisms. That is powerful. So no, that's anger. Justified and unjustified anger. Now, I want to be really clear about something. Anger in and of itself, that's not a sin. That's not what this says. It does not say that. How we act upon it is where we can enter into sinful behavior. That's a big deal. So now, right away, paragraphs 2304 through 2306 talk about peace. In fact, the subtitle of the paragraph is Peace, the Work of Justice, and the Tranquility of Order. Now, listen close. This is important. Whether it is justice within society or the interior justice of holiness, peace is its fruit. Righteous anger and the means it employs should not knowingly produce less justice and less peace than existed before evil intervened. Human prudence, however, is fallible. It cannot necessarily predict the ploys of the adversary, both human and demonic. In addition, fallen human nature is inclined to sin and thus prone to respond with excess to provocation. Thus, even virtue and a well-formed conscience can fail to produce the desired result of justice and peace. Great restraint must be shown, therefore, in the use of violence to achieve justice. In addition to the efforts of those who work assiduously for peace, quote, the peacemakers, society needs the example of those who renounce violence altogether. Their, quote, witness to the gravity of the physical and moral risks of recourse to violence, with all its destruction and death, end quote, should serve to restrain the use of even justified force. Such conscientious objection is a valuable service to society, as the Catechism makes clear. It must be accompanied by the willingness to serve in other capacities. Peacemakers, heavily valued by the church specifically. This is challenging stuff. This is challenging stuff. Now, here's where the Catechism specifically brings up just war. I'm in paragraph 2307 through 17, but we're going to paraphrase, okay? But this is where the language really gets formal, especially for those who really wrestle with this. And I always pray for the 300,000 Catholic young adults in military. Just sit with that, 300,000 young adults in the military that really need this to discern. Okay, so this is a big deal. So this is what the church says about just war specifically. All citizens and all governments are obliged to work for the avoidance of war, period. Okay, we're supposed to work for the avoidance of war. Okay, so bloodlust is what was mentioned earlier. That's the desire for war. Okay, we're supposed to work against that. That's a Catholic teaching, period. You want to spar with me on that one? Read the book. All right. Despite the admonition of the church, it sometimes becomes necessary to use force to obtain the end of justice, righteous anger. Remember that? This is the right and the duty of those who have responsibilities for others, such as civil leaders and police forces. Now, while individuals may renounce all violence, those who must preserve justice may not do so, though it should be the last resort. In fact, the line is, once all peace efforts have failed. That's reiterated in the Vatican II document, Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 79, by the way. Okay. So as with all moral acts, the use of force to obtain justice must comply with three conditions specifically to be morally good. So first, the act must be good in and of itself. So the use of force to obtain justice is morally licit in and of itself, legal. Okay. Second, it must be done with a good intention, which we talked about earlier, must be to correct vice, to restore justice, or to restrain evil, and not to inflict evil for its own sake. And then thirdly, it must be appropriate in the circumstances. That means circumstances change, okay? An act which may otherwise be good and well motivated can be sinful by reason of imprudent judgment and execution. That sounds really wordy. What it means is, even though you think it's right, given the circumstances, you might be wrong. Okay, that's a big deal. That means it's never black and white. It's not moral relativism. It means that there's a relationship between your conscience and what's actually going on. Okay, so in this regard, just war doctrine gives certain conditions for the legitimate exercise of force, and all of these have to be met in order for the church to really say, yeah, this is a just war, just engagement. Okay, the first one is the damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. Number two, all other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. Number three, there must be serious prospects of success. Success being bringing justice and peace. Okay, that criteria is actually pretty straightforward. Number four, the use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. Hence, the church's ardent disagreement with nuclear warfare, okay? The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating this condition. That's in the Catechism 2309. So the responsibility for determining whether all these conditions are met belongs to, listen to this, quote, this from the Catechism, the prudential judgment of those who have responsibility for the common good, which is our civil leadership and us, okay? The church's role consists in enunciating clearly the principles informing the consciences of men and women, and in insisting on the moral exercise of just war. You know, it's interesting. St. John Paul II, then Pope, called Desert Storm, the original Desert Storm in the early 90s, a non-just war, that it was an act of aggression. It's amazing how American Catholics really kind of ignore that. This is St. John Paul II said, this is not a just war. And the papacy has actually criticized other wars of aggression that we've engaged in. Okay, amazing, right? So the church greatly respects those who have dedicated their lives to the defense of their nation. Let me be really clear about that. The church greatly respects and says, if they carry out their duty honorably, they truly contribute to the common good of the nation and the maintenance of peace. That's in Gaudium et Spes. However, the church does caution combatants that not everything is licit in war. Not everything in war is legal. Actions which are forbidden and which constitute morally unlawful orders that may not be followed include, and the church names this, attacks against and mistreatment of non-combatants, wounded soldiers, and prisoners, genocide, whether of a people, nation, or ethnic minorities, indiscriminate destruction of whole cities or vast areas with their inhabitants. Now, listen, given modern means of warfare, especially nuclear, which we talked about, biological, chemical, these crimes against humanity must especially be guarded against. The church is very, very clear about one of the great heroes of the Catholic Church in America, Archbishop Hunthausen, Dutch Hunthausen, one of the last living bishops of Vatican II, got himself in some trouble when he was in Seattle because he stopped paying taxes. He would not support nuclear proliferation or nuclear deterrence during the Reagan era, made a very bold statement. No, I won't advocate. This is the opposite of what the church can justify as war. What a bold political statement. So in the end, listen, it's not enough to wage war just to achieve justice without treating all these causes, okay? So the church says injustice, excessive economic or social inequalities, envy, distrust, and pride raging among men and women and nations constantly threaten peace and cause wars. Everything done to overcome these disorders contributes to building up peace and avoiding war. That's paragraph 2317. That's an awesome line. The church has no crazy illusions that true justice and peace can be attained before the coming of the Lord, okay? Like there's not this like, let's all just get along and smile and wave. The church knows there's gonna be conflict, period. That's really important for people to understand because a lot of times we like to swing to these extremes. I'm gonna go do this violent thing in the name of the church. I'm gonna be totally passive. And in fact, in 2016, there was a huge conference in the Vatican. Like 80 bishops got together and said, absolutely nonviolence, just war theory is obsolete. Get rid of it, da-da-da-da-da. And the church was like, hang on, thank you for your advice, but here's the thing. We know people have weapons. We know there is threat to humanity. There has to be some kind of balance in the logic of understanding this, and that's a big deal. But listen, it's the duty of us, all of us, of our goodwill to work towards peace. Okay, in the words of basically the spiritual dictum, listen, we should work as if everything depended on our efforts. That's very, very Augustine, right? And pray as if everything depended upon God. That is a language of peace. Now, here's the Cliff Notes. Okay, here's basically everything that the Catholic needs to know about the church's teaching on war and peace. Okay, this is like super quick. You should have this in your pocket. All right, number one. Listen close. A war of aggression is intrinsically immoral. That's in our doctrine. Any war for the purpose of expansion, domination, or any other reason other than defense is immoral, regardless of how it's fought. Catechism, paragraph 5, Catechism, paragraph 500. Okay, that's the CSDC of the Catechism, which is a Vatican document. Okay. Number two, the moral law remains in force during war. So sometimes people say, well, anything goes in war and that you can just do anything to win. But that's actually not true. That's not what the church teaches. So the same moral law that exists during times of peace exists during times of war. For example, the normal prohibition against the voluntary and direct killing of innocent people is just as true during a time of war as it is during a time of peace. That's Catechism paragraph 2312. Okay. Now number three, there are strict conditions for justifiably engaging in war. Here's the line. This is paragraph 2309. The strict conditions for legitimate defense by military force require rigorous consideration, which means you got to really think about this. The gravity of such a decision makes it subject to a lot of conditions of moral legitimacy. All right. So at one and the same time, listen to these. The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. Remember, all other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical and ineffective. Remember, there must be serious prospects of success, right? Remember these? And the use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. That's that paragraph in 2309. So you got to remember that. Strict conditions, all right? And remember this, number 4, non-combatants, wounded soldiers and prisoners must be respected and treated humanely. So this is really related to the second one. Just because you're engaging in war doesn't mean anything goes. Non-combatants must be protected. Wounded soldiers, prisoners, and other soldiers who pose little or no threat should also be treated humanely. That's 2313. A lot of that kind of neo-patriotism that's wipe them off the face of the earth, that's called genocide. Okay? So Catholics, you need to check your moral judgment when that language falls out of your mouth. Okay? Number 5, the application of these principles is a prudential judgment. Here's what that means. The principles themselves are not open for dispute. Okay, the determination of whether a particular situation meets these requirements for a just war is a matter of good judgment. That's paragraph 2309. So faithful Catholics sometimes legitimately disagree on whether a particular act of war is just or not. It's okay to disagree, but the church is saying this is how it is. All right. Now listen, some people may be called to radical non-violence. The church makes this super clear. Those who renounce, remember this, violence and bloodshed, and in order to safeguard human rights, make use of those means of defense available to the weakest, bear witness to evangelical charity, provided they do so without harming the rights and obligations of other men and societies. The paragraph 2306 in the Catechism says, they bear legitimate witness to the gravity of the physical and moral risks of recourse to violence, with all its destruction and death. Okay, this is a hot topic. I hope you're like thinking about the depth of the topic. I mean, go watch Hacksaw Ridge, right? I know some of you are thinking about that right now. It's like extreme nonviolence, but unbelievable courage. That is the conviction of some. But your church doesn't say that there will never be violence. It's very clear that there will be war. For crying out loud, read the Bible. Okay, I mean, like, oh my God, you want to read about blood and war? Oh my gosh, okay? That humanity conflicts. But there's this incredible series of prudential judgment that we have to participate in, and I would say discerned, prayerfully considered. I empower young men and women that join the military, that are the defenders of our country. I empower that, but please, your Catholic conscience, be informed about good prudential judgment and invite constantly the Holy Spirit into that judgment. You are truly the defenders of our freedom, but do so as a vehicle of your discipleship. That's a big deal. Whoa, this is a good show. This is a good show. I'm excited for the feedback on this. All right, you guys, don't forget to visit Renovo Podcast for past episodes. Please subscribe to, review, and rate our podcast. We always appreciate your input. Your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments are always welcome at doug@renovopodcast.com. Learn more about me at dougtooke.com or on Twitter and Instagram at DTOOKE and the number 1. Friends, always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.